What happens when the man who owns 20 taxi depots across the city decides to ride in the back seat of his own car, disguised as a trainee? Darren Griggs had inherited the taxi company from his father 8 years ago. Back then, it was a small fleet of 6 cabs and a dusty office tucked between a tire shop and a pawn store. Now, it had grown into a full-fledged operation, 20 depots across the city, over 300 drivers, dispatch teams, and a small army of customer service reps. Darren wore suits now, sat in meetings, and hadn't set foot inside a depot in over a year. That distance was starting to show. Complaints were creeping in. Not just from customers, but from drivers too. Long wait times, poor maintenance, dispatch errors. The last straw was a voicemail from a long-time rider, an elderly woman who said, "Your drivers used to help me with my groceries. Now, they don't even look at me." Darren sat in his office for a long time after that one, staring at the framed photo of his dad in his old brown jacket, polishing a cab with a rag. He remembered how personal his father made every ride feel. That was gone now. Darren needed to see it for himself. He called a friend in marketing to set up a fake identity, Danny, a transfer trainee from another city, supposedly coming in to learn the ropes. He shaved his beard, wore thick glasses, dyed his hair, and even changed his posture. The look was complete. No one at the depots had ever met him in person. Most drivers only knew the CEO's name, not his face. It was perfect. He started his undercover ride along at Depot number 11 on the south side. It was one of the busiest spots, covering both the airport and 3 hospital zones. Perfect place to see the real action. "Hey, new guy," a stocky man in a blue windbreaker called out as he entered the office. "You Danny?" "Yeah," Darren replied, adjusting his glasses. "Transferred from Phoenix." The guy stuck out his hand.
"I'm Marcus.
"I manage this depot. You'll be riding with different drivers this week. Watch, learn, don't get in the way. You're not on payroll yet, so don't touch the wheel." "Got it. Got it." Marcus didn't look up from his clipboard. "You're with Ray this morning. Cab 73. He's been around forever, knows his way around a medical route. Ask him questions, but don't slow him down." Ray was already waiting outside, leaning on the hood of his cab with a coffee in one hand. He was in his late 50s, black baseball cap, quiet eyes. "You Danny?" "That's me." Ray nodded. "Hop in. We got a pickup at Mercy General." The car smelled like fresh wipes and spearmint. Ray drove smooth, not too fast, not too slow. He didn't talk much at first. Darren just watched. The first ride was a nurse finishing a 12-hour shift. She was asleep within minutes of getting in. Ray turned down the radio and drove without a word. Next was a woman in a wheelchair. Ray got out, helped her in carefully, folding the chair with practiced hands. He never once looked annoyed or impatient. "You always help them like that?" Darren asked after the drop-off. Ray shrugged. "Why wouldn't I?" They kept moving. A couple airport runs, a tired mom with a toddler, a man who couldn't remember his own address and had to fumble through his phone for 10 minutes. Ray stayed calm through it all. At one point, Darren saw a cab from their fleet speed past them, swerving between lanes. Ray just muttered, "That's Rick. Always in a hurry. Cuts corners. Does anyone say anything?" Ray gave a short laugh. "You think management listens?" Marcus barely looks up from his desk. They stopped for a break around noon. Ray pulled into a gas station and handed Darren a $5. "Get yourself a coffee. You look like you need it." Darren came back with 2 cups and handed one over. "On me." Ray nodded, taking it. "You're all right, kid." The afternoon pickups were heavier. At one point, they got a call to transport a woman who had just been discharged after chemo. She was pale, shaking, and her daughter looked completely overwhelmed. Ray got out without a word and opened the back door. "Ma'am, take your time." He helped her in, then turned to the daughter. "You want to sit up front? I'll drive slow." The daughter hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." Some drivers just honk and wave us in. Not this one, Darren said quietly. On the way, Ray made sure the air wasn't too cold. He asked if the woman needed to lean her seat back. He even offered to stop if she felt sick. They dropped them off at a small house. The daughter turned back before closing the door. "You're the first driver who didn't make us feel like a problem." Ray just smiled and tipped his cap. "Get some rest, ma'am." As they pulled away, Darren couldn't help but ask, "Have you always been like this?" Ray looked out the window. "My wife went through the same thing. I remember the drivers who made her feel human. I try to be like them." Back at the depot, Marcus barely looked up when they walked in. "Tomorrow you're with Rick. He's fast. You'll learn shortcuts." Ray gave Darren a look. "Good luck." Darren nodded, but inside his stomach turned. He just spent 8 hours watching a man go above and beyond with zero recognition. Meanwhile, the guy who cut corners was being treated like a top performer. He walked out of the depot with a knot in his chest. He had a lot more to see. But one thing was already clear: some people were keeping his father's legacy alive. Others were burying it. Darren arrived at the depot the next morning before sunrise. The lot was half-lit, the air sharp with dew and diesel. A few cabs idled quietly while drivers leaned against bumpers or sat in silence, sipping from paper cups. No one looked particularly awake, and no one looked particularly happy. Marcus emerged from the side office, rubbing his temples. "Rick's out back, cab 81, he said without looking up. "He's on the early shift to Midtown. You'll be riding with him today. Don't be late getting out." Darren made his way around the building and found Rick already in the driver's seat, tapping rhythmically on the steering wheel. He was younger than Darren expected, probably mid-30s, with a shaved head and a Bluetooth headset jammed in one ear. His cab was cluttered with fast food wrappers and a cracked GPS screen hanging from the dash. "Get in or get left," Rick said through the open window. Darren slid in and pulled the door shut. Rick didn't wait. The cab lurched forward before Darren had even buckled his seatbelt. "You got your notepad or whatever?" Rick said, speeding through a yellow light. "If you're here to learn, keep up. I don't slow down for trainees." Darren steadied himself against the side panel. "Got it." They hit the downtown loop before rush hour clogged the streets. Rick had the radio blaring between pickups, switching between dispatch calls and a sports station. His first passenger was a hotel guest with too many bags. Rick popped the trunk but didn't move to help load anything. When the man struggled, Rick rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath. Once they were back on the road, Darren asked, "You always work these hours?" 6-day weeks, Rick replied. "You think I want to?" "Dispatch overschedules, and if you say no too often, they give your routes to someone else. So yeah, I work. A lot." He swerved into the bus lane to bypass traffic, catching a few angry honks as he did. "You ever get ticketed for that?" Rick shrugged. "You learn where the cameras are." By mid-morning, Darren had seen enough to confirm Ray's quiet warning from the day before. Rick prioritized speed over care. Passengers were treated as temporary inconveniences, not people. At one point, a pregnant woman asked if he could slow down on a rough patch of road, and he responded by blasting the AC and saying, "There, now you're distracted." Darren leaned forward. "You're not worried someone's going to report you?" "That's the thing," Rick said, smirking at his own reflection in the rear view mirror. "No one does. They complain, sure, but nothing happens. Marcus signs off on our logs without reading them. As long as I hit my numbers, I'm gold." They stopped for gas shortly after noon. Rick didn't offer to buy Darren anything or even ask if he needed a break. He went inside, bought himself an energy drink and a scratch-off ticket, and came back cursing the vending machine. "You ever work with Ray?" Darren asked once they were back on the road. Rick made a face. "Old guy?" "Yeah, once or twice. He takes forever. Tries to be everyone's therapist. I don't ride with him anymore. Slows me down." "What about the regulars?" Anyone you like driving? Rick laughed. Like them? I don't even remember their names. They're in, they're out. That's the job. Darren didn't respond. He watched the city blur past, the cab weaving between lanes. This wasn't just an attitude problem. It was a systems problem. Rick was rewarded for cutting corners. The only reason he behaved this way was because no one ever stopped him, and because the people in charge didn't seem to care. They made one last drop before looping back toward the depot. As they pulled in, Rick tossed his empty bottle on the floor and exhaled like he'd just finished a marathon. Not bad for a Tuesday, he said. You keep up all right. Maybe you'll last. Inside, Marcus was arguing with someone on the phone, pacing behind the front desk. Darren waited nearby, pretending to read a driver's schedule pinned to the wall. No, I told you, I don't have a backup for that route, Marcus snapped. If she's out sick, then someone's going to have to double up or we cancel the pickup. He slammed the receiver down and sighed. Darren stepped closer. Everything okay? Marcus looked up, surprised. It's not your business, but no. We're short again. Half the part-timers flake and corporate won't approve overtime. So, yeah, it's not great. Does that happen often? Marcus gave a tired laugh. Buddy, I haven't had a full roster in 6 months. Darren nodded slowly. You ever think about rotating the long-hour guys out? Give others a shot. They'd walk, Marcus said flatly. Rick brings in triple the fares of most. I rotate him out, he quits. Then I've got no one. Darren didn't press further. He left the depot and walked a few blocks before pulling out his phone. He called the internal HR contact listed under his fake trainee profile. This is Danny from Depot 11, he said. Quick question, how do drivers get evaluated? Is there a review system? The woman on the other end sounded confused. Evaluated? Not really. Route logs and fare counts get tracked automatically. If there's a complaint, it goes to depot managers, but we don't do performance reviews unless there's a major incident. Thanks, he said and hung up. That night, Darren sat in his apartment going over everything he'd seen. Ray, who treated people with care, got nothing but indifference from management. Rick, who gamed the system, was their golden boy. Marcus was too overwhelmed to fix it, and corporate had no eyes on the ground. The next morning, Darren returned to the depot with a plan. He hadn't come to play tourist. He wanted to see the truth, so he could change it. Now he had enough. He arrived early again, this time asking Marcus if he could ride with someone new. Who's on the hospital loop today? Darren asked. Marcus checked his clipboard. Lena. Cab 52. You sure? She's only been here 2 months. I'll manage. Lena was waiting by her cab, checking her tire pressure. She looked up, slightly confused as Darren approached. You're Danny, right? The trainee? That's me. All right, she said, brushing her hands on her jeans. We've got 3 pickups from the cancer center and a return from the VA. Should be steady. As they drove, Darren noticed how methodical she was. She confirmed addresses before departure, kept a pocket notebook for special requests, and even carried an extra umbrella in the back seat for rainy days. You always this organized? Darren asked. Lena smiled faintly. I used to work in home care. Old habits. These folks don't have a lot of control over their day. I try to give them at least one part that goes right. Their passengers that day included a Vietnam veteran with a prosthetic leg, a woman in her 70s who hadn't spoken since her last treatment, and a teenage boy recovering from a spinal procedure. Lena didn't force conversation but made sure each person was comfortable, adjusting mirrors so they wouldn't catch their reflections if they didn't want to. When they returned to the depot in the afternoon, Darren stayed back to help Lena clean out the cab. There wasn't much to do. She kept it spotless. You planning on staying with the company? Darren asked. She hesitated. I don't know. I like the work. But I applied for full-time 2 weeks ago and haven't heard anything. Hard to commit when you're not sure they're going to keep you. He nodded, then said, You should hear something soon. You're doing good work. Lena looked at him, puzzled. Thanks. That means a lot. As Darren walked through the depot lot, he caught a glimpse of Ray pulling in from a shift. They exchanged a brief nod. Across the lot, Rick was laughing with another driver, tossing his keys in the air like he owned the place. Darren clenched his jaw. He was done watching. Tomorrow, he'd be back not as Danny the trainee but as the CEO. And this time, people would listen. Darren arrived at Depot 11 just after 6 in the morning. No disguise this time, no glasses, no dyed hair, no altered voice. He wore a simple gray jacket, dark jeans, and a worn pair of boots. Nothing flashy. But when he stepped inside the office, the shift was immediate. Marcus stood behind the front desk, tapping through route assignments on a greasy touchscreen. He looked up, eyes narrowing. You lost or something? I'm not Danny, Darren said. My name's Darren Griggs. Marcus blinked, confusion giving way to a slow, dawning realization. His posture stiffened, and he looked toward the dispatch room as if hoping someone else had heard first. I'm the owner, Darren said. And I've been riding out of this depot for the last 3 days. Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I'll speak to the team out back, Darren said, already walking toward the garage door. The lot was half full, drivers arriving, others finishing night runs. Darren stepped up onto a concrete block near the maintenance bay and raised his voice. Morning. I won't keep you long. Heads turned. A few drivers pulled off earbuds. Lena was leaning against cab 52, a thermos in her hand. Ray stood nearby, wiping down his windshield. Rick froze in the middle of unlocking his trunk, keys dangling from his hand. I'm Darren Griggs. I own this company. Most of you know the name, but not the face. That's on me. I've been too far removed from what's happening on the ground. So, I came here undercover to see it myself. No one spoke. A man near the back crossed his arms. Another driver muttered something under his breath. In the last 3 days, Darren continued, I've seen drivers going above and beyond, and I've seen people cutting corners, risking safety, and treating passengers like an inconvenience. Rick looked down at the pavement. I've watched some of you drive with care, patience, and real professionalism. Others frankly shouldn't be behind the wheel wearing this company's logo. He stepped down off the block and turned toward Marcus, who had followed him out, pale and tight-lipped. Let's go inside. Inside the tiny office, the tension was sharp enough to cut through drywall. Darren shut the door behind them. I'm not here to make this a performance, he said. But we've got structural issues. You've been left to manage too much with too little oversight. That ends today. Marcus rubbed his jaw. You could have just called. We've been drowning out here. You could have called too, Darren replied. About the complaints. About the scheduling gaps. About the people doing twice the work for the same pay. Marcus didn't argue. He sank into the chair behind the desk and stared down at his hands. I need a full list of current drivers, their routes, complaints filed, and how long they've been waiting on full-time positions. Marcus nodded slowly. I can pull it. You'll have it ready by this afternoon. I'll also need the last 60 days of dispatch records and maintenance reports. Darren stepped back outside. Rick was standing near cab 81, arms crossed, watching him. We need to talk. Rick followed him in silence to the far side of the lot, away from the others. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pavement. I know who you are now, Rick said. Didn't realize before. I figured. Rick shifted his weight. Look, I know I'm not the friendliest guy on the road, but I get the job done. I hit my numbers. You do, Darren said. But at what cost? I rode with you yesterday. You ran a red light. You ignored a passenger's request to slow down. I watched you treat people like they were holding you up. Rick's jaw tightened. It's not personal. It's just how you stay ahead in this system. That system's broken, Darren said. And it's not going to protect you anymore. Rick's voice dropped. You going to fire me? I'm putting you on a 30-day probation, Darren said. You'll be monitored, and if there's even one more complaint, you're out. No discussion. Rick didn't respond. He turned and walked back to his car. Darren stood alone for a moment, then walked back toward the depot. Lena was still by her cab, watching him cautiously. You got a second? Darren asked. She nodded and followed him to the side of the building, near the chain-link fence. I read your application for full-time, Darren said. It's been sitting on someone's desk for too long. I figured it got lost, Lena replied. It didn't. You're being moved to full-time effective next week. Benefits included. No more floating hours. Lena's eyebrows lifted, but she didn't smile. Why now? Because I rode with you yesterday. I watched how you treated people. You're exactly the kind of person I want representing this company. She looked down at her thermos, then back up. Thanks, she said. But I hope you're not just here to hand out promotions and disappear again. I'm not, Darren replied. This depot's getting new protocols. Starting Monday, we're implementing performance evaluations, passenger feedback scoring, and route audits. Dispatch will operate under a rotating supervisor system to prevent burnout. And drivers who consistently go above and beyond will be eligible for bonuses, not just based on fare volume. Lena nodded. That's a start. It's more than that, Darren said. I'm assigning an independent field supervisor to this depot. Someone who doesn't report through the usual chain. I want eyes on the ground at all times. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds expensive. It's worth it. Inside, Marcus was finishing the printouts Darren had requested. The desk was cluttered with route logs, complaint summaries, and driver schedules. Darren scanned the sheets, noting the names that kept appearing in positive feedback reports. Ray, Lena, a driver named Javed who did overnight routes out of Depot 14. He circled them. These drivers, he said to Marcus, they ever get recognition? Marcus shook his head. I mean, sometimes we say thanks, but no formal stuff. That changes now. I want a monthly recognition system, company-wide. Driver of the Month, peer nominated. Comes with a cash bonus and spotlight on our rider app. Marcus scribbled notes quickly. Also, Darren added, stop overloading the reliable ones. Spread the routes. It's not sustainable. I'd rather take fewer rides and do them right than burn out good people. Marcus looked up. We need more drivers. Then we start recruiting, Darren said. And we fix our retention problem, so we stop losing the ones we already have. By mid-afternoon, Darren had sent out internal memos to all depot managers. He scheduled a mandatory call for the next morning, no excuses. Changes were coming, and everyone would be held accountable. He stepped back out into the lot just as Ray was locking up his cab. How long you been driving here? Darren asked. 18 years, Ray said. Long enough to see the shift. You ever think about retiring? Ray shrugged. Not yet. Still like the road. Would you consider mentoring new drivers? Paid mentorship, I mean. Show them how to do things right. Ray studied him for a second, then nodded once. If it helps. It will, Darren said. I'll have it formalized by next week. Ray didn't say anything else. He just got in his cab and drove off, smooth and steady. Darren stood there for a long time after the lot had mostly cleared. The depot wasn't fixed. Not yet. But for the first time in a long while, it wasn't being ignored. Tomorrow, he'd be at Depot 7. Then 12. Then 16. One by one, he'd work through them all. Not just to clean house, but to rebuild it, brick by brick, the way it should have been all along. The following week, Darren was back at headquarters, seated in a small meeting room with the blinds drawn and a yellow notepad in front of him. No assistants, no department heads, just him, and a stack of interview transcripts from field supervisors who had started shadowing drivers across depots 2 through 9. The early reports painted a clear picture. The issues he'd uncovered at Depot 11 weren't isolated. A dispatcher at Depot 6 had been manually rerouting calls to his preferred drivers for a cut of their bonuses. A driver in Depot 3 had been driving a vehicle with faulty brakes for over a month because maintenance logs weren't being reviewed. And Depot 9 had 3 part-time drivers working full-time hours without benefits, none of whom had ever met a manager in person. Darren flipped through the final page and leaned back in his chair. The company had grown too fast. Expansion had outpaced infrastructure, and the human side of the business had been left behind. He had assumed processes would protect people. That was a mistake. He called a meeting with the regional managers the next morning. Not a video call, he made them come in person. They sat in a rectangular room off the main hallway, most of them arriving guarded, unsure what tone the meeting would take. Once everyone was seated, Darren stood at the front of the room. No slideshow. No script. I went undercover because I didn't trust the reports I was getting. I wanted to see the truth, he said. And what I saw wasn't a driver problem. It was a leadership problem. Ours. A few managers shifted in their seats. One of them, a woman named Carla, who oversaw the northern depots, folded her arms. Some of us have been raising these concerns for months, she said. But we get overruled every time budget allocation comes up. I know, Darren replied. And that's going to change. Starting today, every depot will have quarterly audits conducted by independent field officers. Not just financials, driver satisfaction, rider experience, maintenance compliance. If a depot fails 2 audits, the management structure gets overhauled. No exceptions. A tall man at the far end of the table, Javier, raised his hand slightly. What about dispatch? Some of us have been running with outdated software for years. We can't manage what we can't see. Dispatch is getting upgraded in phases. The first rollout starts in 2 weeks. You'll get real-time metrics, route balancing, and a complaint tracker that doesn't just log issues but flags patterns. Carla leaned forward slightly. And the drivers? If we start putting pressure on performance, some of the good ones will walk. They've already got offers from rideshare companies. They're not the ones I'm worried about, Darren said. The drivers who treat people with dignity, who show up every day and work like professionals, they're getting a new contract. Higher base pay, guaranteed rest windows between long shifts, and enrollment in a new benefits program that includes mental health support. There was a pause. The room quieted. Javier lowered his eyes. You really went out there yourself? Darren nodded. 3 days. Drove with 3 different people. I learned more in those hours than I have in 6 months of reports. No one had anything to add. Eventually, Carla uncrossed her arms. If we get the tools, we'll do our part. But this needs to be consistent. No more one-time initiatives. It won't be, Darren said. This isn't a patch. It's the new standard. After the meeting, he took the elevator down to the operations floor and walked into a room full of cubicles where the customer care team worked. He hadn't set foot in that space in over a year. A few heads turned as he entered, surprised to see him. He stopped by a desk near the back, where a young man with shoulder-length hair was typing quickly. You handle ride complaints? Darren asked. Yeah. Mostly escalation calls. What happens when someone calls in about a driver refusing to help with mobility access? The man hesitated. We log it, tag it by severity, and send it to the depot manager. They're supposed to follow up. And do they? The man looked down. Sometimes. But a lot of passengers don't leave a callback number, so it stalls. Darren looked around at the other desks. From now on, you'll have a direct escalation path to a compliance officer. We're building a rider care division that reports outside the depot structure. That way, no complaint gets buried. He thanked the man and left. On the way out, he passed a wall covered in faded posters, old safety campaigns, outdated performance charts. He stopped, peeled one off the corkboard, and tossed it in the bin. The image had a smiling cartoon cab and a caption that read, Drive safe, Be great. It felt like a lie. That afternoon, he returned to Depot 11 without calling ahead. Marcus was in the office, hunched over a list of route pairings. He looked up, startled but not defensive. We're short 3 drivers today, he said. Lena picked up an extra shift. Ray's out on a hospital loop. Darren set a folder on the desk. Here's the new operating procedures. You'll be getting a field supervisor next week. Their job is to support, not spy. Use them. Marcus opened the folder, scanning the first few lines. This is a full rebuild. It has to be. Outside, the lot was quieter than usual. A few cabs idled near the far fence. Darren left the office and walked across the gravel toward Lena's cab. She was leaning against the side, eating a granola bar and squinting at the sky. Got a minute? He asked. She nodded, brushing crumbs from her vest. Your full-time status is processed. First check hits next Friday. Health plan starts next cycle. And I'm putting you on the shortlist for driver trainer certification. She raised an eyebrow.
Trainer?
You've got the right instincts. We'll pair you with 1 or 2 new hires a week. Nothing heavy. Just enough to pass on what matters. She considered that, then said, You sure people want to learn the slow way? I'm sure they need to. She nodded once. Then I'm in. As he turned to leave, she called after him. You going back undercover again? Not any time soon, he said. But I'll be around. He walked to the far end of the lot, where Ray was pulling in from a late route. His cab came to a smooth stop, no rush, no fuss. Darren waited until he stepped out. Got a minute? Ray nodded. I'm launching an advisory panel, Darren said. 3 drivers from different depots. They'll meet with me once a month. No managers. Just direct input. I want you on it. Ray studied him for a moment, then said, You listening now? I am. Then yeah, I'll do it. Darren extended his hand. Ray shook it. As the sun dipped behind the depot roof, casting long shadows over the parking lot, Darren stood still for a moment, watching the quiet motion of the place. Cabs pulling in, doors shutting gently, radios turning off. It wasn't fixed. Not completely. But the ground was steady again. This time, he'd stay close enough to feel when it shifted.